I met Patsy when I was 16. And I knew the minute I met him that I wanted Patsy. And normally I get what I want. And I did. We got engaged when I was 17. But we didn't get married until I was 20. It took me 3 years to walk him up the aisle now. But very happy marriage. I mean, 20 years, and we actually had 4 children. Our first baby was a full-term stillbirth, which was just devastating, really devastating, because I just thought you get married and you get pregnant and you started your family, and that's all I ever wanted in life. Never wanted a career, just forgot about my education and just wanted to get married and have my own family. They were working for looking for civilian workers in the local army camps. So Patsy applied for a job there, and he got a job in the kitchen. And then eventually, well, there was secrecy attached to that. It's like when they say we kept your secrets. You didn't go out and you didn't say, I'm working in the army camp. You didn't do that. So that restricted your social life as well. But it was a good life. We had a good life. Patsy, it was a well-paid job. We had a good standard of living. And
can I just ask, maybe just make one comment? Because probably about half the people who listen to this aren't from here, you know, maybe live overseas. And just to kind of clarify our kind of conflict, if you like, in this country was a British-Irish conflict, I suppose. British usually saw themselves as Protestants, Catholics saw themselves as Irish. So the British Army would tend to have not been supported by the Catholic population. And so what your husband was doing was kind of dangerous for him in a sense, or it was unusual for a Catholic person to be doing that.
Yeah, it was a dangerous occupation. Eventually the paramilitary started putting warnings in the local media for civilian workers that, you know, just if you don't stop working here, this is going to happen to you, that's going to happen to you. Patsy ignored them. Patsy didn't have any trade. He had no other way to earn a living, and he was keeping his family. And that's the only reason he was working there, and he decided that he wasn't going to let the IRA dictate to him how he would live his life and what he would have to do with it and how he was going to rear his own wains. So he ignored the warnings in the media. We had one incident 4 years actually before his death, where our house was taken over and we were held hostage, and Patsy was forced to drive our car loaded with 200 pounds of explosives into the camp where he worked. Now, he wasn't stopped going in the gate. They just opened the gate and let him in when they saw the car coming, because he was a worker there. What happened at that time was that he drove the car into a safety place, jumped out of the car and shouted to the army, you know, I'm loaded, boys, I'm loaded, meaning that there was a bomb in the car. So they detonated the bomb in the car. Nobody was hurt. And Patsy was questioned, and then he was taken home in the early hours of the morning. So when this second incident happened, you sort of thought it was nearly the same thing was going to happen. And when the men were staying with me and the children in the house, we were held hostage at gunpoint while Patsy was taken away. Now, I questioned him constantly, because I felt guilty that I hadn't noticed a lot of fine details 4 years previous to that about the men who were in the house. So I told them I knew everything, what you could see and whatever, and I kept questioning them, and they told me, and I was foolish enough to believe them, if you do exactly as you're told, nobody's going to get hurt and your husband will get home. And I thought, oh, that's all right. Sure, we lost the car the last time. What odds? It's only a car. If they blow up the car, that's okay. But, well, that's not actually what happened. You know, they took my husband over the border, past the checkpoint where there were soldiers that he was working with. And obviously, Patsy would have been waved on in the car because the car was recognised as his car. and he was waved on. They took him to, we'll say, a safe house over the border, and they chained him to a van which contained 1,200 pounds of explosives, and he was forced to drive the van to the army checkpoint at Coshquin. He told me the last time that they kept reminding him that there were people with guns with his family, and if he didn't do what he was told, that the family would be injured. So we take it for granted, because he's not there to tell us, that he was told the same again. Do what you're told, because there's people with guns in your family. And he was forced to drive the van into the army checkpoint at Coshquin, where it was detonated by remote control. Patsy and 5 soldiers were blown to pieces. I have evidence from the surviving soldiers that Patsy actually saved men that night, because he shouted to them, "Run, boys, run." That's not the exact words he used. He was very good at using the F word. So it was run to F, I'm loaded. So get out. And they ran. And that's what happened. He was 5 soldiers. Well, I've heard the evidence of the policeman who was in charge of the clear up, and he said that there were men in a Land Rover, and when they opened the door of the Land Rover, there was nobody there. They had been evaporated and sucked out of the wee viewing thing. So there was nothing left. So I had nothing to recognize and identify Patsy from. But the soldier, the policeman who was in charge, talks in his testimony about lifting a stone and fighting a human heart and fighting a bum cheek and just lifting it and putting it in the bag, lifting it and putting it in the bag. And
he obviously loved you greatly, your husband Patsy. I can imagine the horror of realizing his family was being held at gunpoint, and
it was actually 4 hours before he was taken away until the explosion.
Wow. And what was the days after that like, Kathleen, for you? Was it? Well,
because I had no evidence of Patsy's death, there were bits of bodies, and there were 5 soldiers and Patsy. That's how many bodies that you had to account for. And because there was no evidence, when the detectives took me to Altnagalvin to the mortuary, I thought they were taking me to identify Patsy, because I said to them outside, "Is there anybody, allowed to come in with me when I'm identifying Patsy's body?" And he just looked at me and he says, "Kathleen, the coffin's closed. There's nothing to identify." And that was 3 days later, and it hadn't actually sunk into me that I had nothing to see, that I could never for the rest of my life picture Patsy in his coffin, and it leaves me that it's very difficult to me for me to go into a wake house, as we call it, where the coffin and the body are on display. It's difficult for me to do that, because I feel very envious of those people who can look in at their husband and say, "Well, now I know you're gone, and I have to get my head around that and come to terms with it." I didn't have that, so I still thought that maybe Patsy had escaped. And I talk about that in the production that we did, where I just thought Patsy was out there and hiding somewhere, and someday I would get a phone call, because I packed bags for myself and the 3 kids and kept them ready to run whenever I got the phone call from Patsy. Come and live here. I'm in Australia, I'm in Canada, I'm wherever. So I just thought that's what's going to happen sometime. And it took me until the inquest, when I heard the story of the soldiers and the policemen who were on duty that day, when I heard them talking about body bags, and I thought, they're talking about Patsy. So that's when I started to realise that I was never going to see Patsy again.